Welcome. Hope you had a lovely lunch. Johnny, great
Jen.
to see you. This is our third year in a row that we're sitting here for the threat brief. It's great to reconvene with you on this stage. I want to acknowledge that the last time we were sitting on this very stage was the day after Election Day, OODAcon 2024. And I wanted to commend and compliment you because much of what we discussed and many of your assessments, including related to when we talked about what we called super empowered individuals, regionalization and polarization, a lot of those assessments came true. You were spot on. So we are in the presence of an oracle, everybody, and not just a very adept analyst. So pay attention because we're predicting the future here. Bob has always reminded me when preparing for this talk to make sure that our discussion of global threats is relevant to everybody in this room, of executive decision makers. And so I want to frame our discussion, always robust and rich when it comes to talking to Johnny about these various topics, as it impacts those of you in this room who make important decisions for your organizations. Johnny, I wanted to start by asking you, since almost exactly a year ago, OODAcon 2024, when reflecting on all of the things that have happened, and it's been an eventful 11 months, what's been the most significant threat or concern that you have on the geopolitical, economic, security landscape that has unfolded in the past year?
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Jen, for the question. And it's a pleasure to share the stage with you once again. Your questions were pretty tough last year, so this year I brought along 2 lifelines instead of 1. All right, so in case I start to stumble, they're out there in the audience and they'll help me out. When I look at what's transpired in the past year, I see a continuation of the trends that we've been talking about for the past 3 years. But if I were to put a finger on the one thing that I think is most critical to our national security, that is the thing that's having the greatest impact, I would say that is the fracturing that we're seeing within our country. Okay? And so, while we generally would talk about national security from the perspective of the threat, that is a country that is competing with us or that is acting as a disruptor. The reality of it is that unless we can have national coherence, we can't project power abroad. We can't retain our position at the top of the world order. We can't lead in technology. And so my concern is the path that we're going down, where we can't seem to find a middle ground in our conversations. We can't agree on the facts that we're discussing, that it puts us in a precarious position. So that's really the biggest issue, the most critical issue that I see that we must resolve from a national security perspective.
That's really helpful. Is there anything within that realization, assessment, and observation of that fracturing that has exceeded your expectation, either positively or negatively? And have you been surprised by anything within that description you just gave?
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, we had a conversation about the polarization before, and so there was an expectation that trend was going to continue until there was some, I like to call it, catastrophic event that forces us to come together, but I don't know what that event is. But what I would tell you is that what I've been surprised about is how technology, AI, has increased the pace of change in terms of that polarization, how it has forced from a mass perspective, that is, to be able to affect large swaths of the population and with disinformation. Again, it was there before, so this isn't something new. But if we look at, say, the election in 2020, we talked about Russian troll farms. You don't need Russian troll farms anymore. Anybody sitting in their bedroom can get a chat bot, okay, and have them go out and spread disinformation across the internet. And because a significant portion of our population gets their information from those sources, and sometimes our only source, We are in a precarious position because we're pushing ourselves further and further apart. That acceleration without a coherent solution, actually without a discussion of how do we resolve that, how do we put the rules in place that allow us to have better, more informed discourse in that public square that we call the internet. Yeah. So I think that what has surprised me is that it's been exponential in terms of the divisions that it's causing.
Thanks.
Well, I should add, the social media, the AI, the internet did not cause those divisions. They amplified them. Okay, they already exist within our country. So it's just an amplification, and that amplification pushes us towards the more negative ends of the distribution curve, so to speak.
Right, right. When reflecting on the present into the future, I want to talk about your assessments and concerns as they relate to three categories of threats. Mm-hmm. Nation states, non-state actors, and systemic vulnerabilities. So let's start with nation state actors, and if you don't mind, I'd like to start the discussion focusing on Russia and China. Mm-hmm. Insofar as Russia, how should we in this room understand and regard the US-Russia relationship right now, given the multiple false starts on peace in Ukraine, and mm-hmm. how do you assess overall the strategic competitive relationship between the U.S. and Russia right now and going into the future?
Right. So when you generally hear the conversation about our competitors, it's framed in the context of strategic competitors, global power competition, so to speak. But Russia is really not a strategic competitor. It is a strategic disruptor, a strategic spoiler in terms of trying to maintain its status, its influence on world affairs and events. And that includes a robust operations within the gray zone of a conflict, not just the hard military power that you see them using in Ukraine, but the use of technologies, social media as such, and other informational sources to try to drive wedges between us and our allies, between NATO, between any of the purveyors, the police of the global order, so to speak. Because Russia no longer has the ability to project power in the way that it had during the Soviet Union, its relevance in the global discussion is only because of the disruptive capabilities that it has. Now, don't get me wrong in terms of the conversation about military power. Russia has the largest nuclear weapon arsenal in the world, okay? It is a threat, okay? It's a real threat, and it's modernizing that capability to include modernization of the tactical nuclear weapons that could potentially be used. And so that is a threat that everyone must consider when we look at Russia. But the reality of it is that Russia does not have the ability to lead the global order. It does not have the ability to put new rules in place for how nations will deal amongst themselves. The last thing that I would say about Russia is that you're starting to see an alliance. I think the intelligence community calls it an alliance of convenience now, where Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China, all authoritarian countries, are starting to work together where they see a shared interest. And that shared interest is generally diametrically opposed to the things that we want to do as a nation, that Western democracies want to do.
China is very much on the forefront of our minds in general, but specifically this week as President Trump travels in Asia and negotiates various deals. Wanted to specifically ask you, how should we think about the US-China relationship through the prism of AI competition specifically?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So when you look at the US-China relationship, you have to look at what China's vision, what China's goals are. And so China wants to be the leader in terms of technology, okay? And so whether it's AI, whether it's biotech, whether it's quantum computing, China wants to be the lead, okay? They want to be the technological lead. They also want to to establish the global standards by which all of those technologies operate. They want to be the world's #1 power, and that's from both an economic and a military perspective. And so they are competing in this strategic competition, so to speak, without limits. And if we now were to focus that into the AI arena, it is how do you generate innovation? How does China generate that innovation within its controlled market structure? Okay? For the United States, we've always been an innovative nation. That is, we've had freedom, we've had transparency, we have openness, and that has allowed us to innovate more quickly than any nation on earth. But if I look at it from a China's perspective, in order to catch up, so to speak, they've applied those technologies to the wholesale theft of intellectual property, okay? To agreements with foreign countries companies that we talked about before operating in China, that they have to share their intellectual property, and then, several years later, you find that the Chinese counterpart is building, the same product that this foreign company brought in, and that foreign company has no business within China. It's not selling anything. China is using that whole of government civil military fusion strategy to advance its military and intelligence apparatus. And that is placing us in a position where it has become untenable in terms of our relationship with China, that we have to find a way to secure our position. And that's caused us a significant number of changes in the relationship. Now, I know your question was on AI, all right? But AI is just one of the tools that they're using in order to achieve their goal. The last thing that I would tell you is that China and Chinese companies and their influence has grown exponentially over the past decade. You see that they're embedded in every element of commerce, from port to 5G to telecommunication to artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And therefore, we as a nation have to have a strategy in which we can compete with the Chinese, that we can ensure that we maintain our position in the global order.
You brought up civil-military fusion, which is something that the U.S. government is increasingly sensitive to and regulating for through things like the DoD blacklist, similar list from the Department of Commerce, as well as various tariffs we've heard about. Given all of that and the concern and sensitivity attached to doing business in China, with Chinese entities, their investments here, how should we in this room proceed? How should we think about that as we navigate our businesses and our reputations and how we align with those policies, of course?
Absolutely. So China's rise has resulted in a bifurcation of the technological spheres. I think I would use it that way, technological spheres of influence in the world. And so China, through a number of different applications, from its control of rare earth minerals to its Belt and Road initiatives, to its debt financing, to its flooding the market with products, technological products that are equivalent to dumping because of the government subsidies that they achieve. But they've gained a larger portion. And because of that, I think you've got about 140 countries right now that are tied to China in terms of its architecture, data architecture, in terms of telecommunications, in terms of the rule standards, that is how that data is managed. And so that leaves two systems in the world. One that is led by the Chinese based on their authoritarian system, capitalist system, but still authoritarian in how it's implemented, where state controls information, state controls innovation, and then on the other side, the United States and the Western-led democracies in a system that is generally open and transparent, in terms of sharing of information. So for companies that are in the room, you have to navigate those two systems. Okay, you have to operate in countries where Chinese technology, hell, in some locations within our country where Chinese technology is the most widely used platforms within those regions. And that navigation means that you have to understand a number of issues, from export controls to supply chains to intellectual property protection, okay? And so as a company, what I would tell you is that you have to adjust the way you look at your business. There has been a convergence now of national security and corporate strategy. And the things that you do, the decisions that you make, affect our strategic, our national resilience. It affects the survivability of your company within that global marketplace. And, we have to be able to maintain our protection of our intellectual property, our openness within that environment, and our transparency without turning those into vulnerabilities that can be exploited by our adversaries, by, again, China in this particular case.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I want to move on to non-state actors, which we'll expansively consider to be criminal enterprises, organized crime, terrorist groups, influence operation networks, and domestic violent extremists. And other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, enjoy the play. Among those threats and any others, what to you are the salient non-state actor threats that you think, well, that you're watching and you're concerned about, and that others in this room should be really tracking?
Okay. So last year, we talked about the breakdown of the global order, and that nations would start to move towards regionalization. That is the onshoring, reshoring of your manufacturing capabilities, the tightening of their supply lines, the ability to have some level of energy independence. I see a continuation of that trend when we start looking at the non-state actors. In today's environment, I guess the most poignant example would be the War Department's operations against drug cartels within the Caribbean right now. And at a tactical level, it looks like gunboat diplomacy, right? We're out there, we're forcing our will on these organizations. We're going to prevent them from bringing drugs into our country. So that's what it looks like at a tactical level. But I think that, again, without defending any of the policies or getting into the politics of it, but looking at it from a national security perspective, it appears to me to be a re-regionalization strategy in disguise, okay? That is that the only way for us to compete against our major adversary, China, as we just talked about, that bifurcation that's happening in the technological and global power arena, is to secure our own backyard, our home, okay, our hemisphere. And we're doing that in terms of bringing manufacturing back to the States, bringing manufacturers to those friendly countries within the region. Mexico is becoming one of the major manufacturing hubs for the United States. But when we look at that neighborhood, there are also risks out there that could be detrimental to us in strategic competition. There are narco economies, okay, that destabilize countries, that destabilize regions. Okay? There's the Belt and Road Initiative of China, especially in Latin America, South America, where they're controlling the ports and the telecommunications systems that we have to that we have to change. Okay, we have to change the value proposition for those countries, and so. If I look at it from that regionalization, national security perspective, I think that what we're doing is we're exercising geoeconomics as a defense strategy. We are leveraging our economic capabilities. We're investing in areas where we need to ensure that they use U.S. or Western-based technology. We're providing aid to countries that are of importance to us. And we're sending a message to the hemisphere that America will ensure the freedom of capabilities of the industrial base, the energy independence within this region through its execution of this strategy. Now, some would say it's distasteful in the way it's being done. I've actually said it's distasteful in what we're saying. But if you pull back up to the strategic level, it's following that trend that we talked about before of regionalization.
When thinking about systemic vulnerabilities that you're concerned about and that we should be tracking, do you still believe that the regionalization and polarization associated with that is going to continue to be the salient systemic threat and vulnerability to be tracking, or are there others, or is there a more significant one that you're paying attention to right now?
Yeah, so I do think that the regionalization is going to be the model for the future. Countries have to have ownership of their data, of their compute, of their information architectures, and if you have another country that has the ability to control that, then they control the pace of innovation for you. So we're going to continue to see this regionalization. We're going to continue to see the reshoring or nearshoring. I actually think, though, that it's part of the strategic competition that we discussed earlier. It's the two sides of the same coin. So as the global order breaks down, as we vie for positions within that order, whether the United States or China is going to be the number one power, okay, or at least the one that helps define and sets the rules by which the global order operates. That coupled with what we're seeing in terms of the fracturing in the United States are the critical issues that we have to draw. So one of the same, again, if we're not united, if we don't have a coherent national strategy, then we can't succeed in strategic competition. We can't project power globally without having that coherence. So I think it's part of the same sort of issue. And we have to look at it from the perspective of what that does to us. So if I'm looking at it from the fragmentation perspective, from a national security perspective, it leads to slower decisions, a whiplash in terms of policy, and you've seen that from one administration to the next. It leads to an inability to do long-term planning, okay, for the things that we need to do as a nation in order to be secure. From a industry perspective, it looks like regulatory volatility, okay? 1 year I'm planning for EVs, or should I say clean energy, the next is out the window. So how do I make a long-term plan as a company in that sort of operational environment? And because we can't make those plans, it puts us at a lesser position, a more vulnerable position in terms of the competition. So I see it as really, the same issue is how do we better compete within this global environment, this global marketplace? How do we maintain the position, the freedom, the transparency that America has always represented within that global environment?
What are your thoughts on the impact of weakening democratic principles and practices in this country and elsewhere? How does that play into and affect what you've shared about the lack of coherence and the fracturing in society? How do you see those two playing out in the coming year and years?
So I'm going to ask you for a follow-up with that. When you say the lack of democratic values, what are you specifically?
Or weakening of some democratic principles and practices that has been discussed in the past year.
Yeah. So what I would tell you is that in times of crisis, people find comfort in security. Okay, those that can provide that security are generally the ones that. In the way you're describing it, would lean more towards that non-democratic side. That doesn't last for long, okay?
That's reassuring.
So it's a matter of, I guess I'll use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Well, first of all, I need to make sure that I feel safe before I worry about any of these other things. I need to have the basic needs taken care of. But in the global environment, I would tell you that you're absolutely seeing across the world, because of this uncertainty, this fracturing of the existing system, that people are going towards more authoritarian or non-democratic types of government. And that's simply because they need to protect the interests that they have, and they find that this is the best way to do it from their perspective. I'm saying these are my opinions, okay? But I do think that if you look at it from a historical perspective, generally that's what people do. Now, the breakdown of the global order, okay? I don't know how long it's going to last, but it will end, okay? There will be winners, there will be losers, it'll be sorted out, and there will be new rules that are put in place. And once those rules are put in place, then you will see a more liberalization of the political process than you may currently see. I would also say that as an American, we can't lose that which makes us a nation. I mean, we are from the world, okay? We come from every walk of life, from every racial group, from every social economical background. And the one thing that we share is that vision that everyone has an opportunity to succeed. Okay, that there's freedom in our country, there's transparency, there's an ability to question things when we don't think that it's right. And so we cannot afford to lose that, because even if we win, we won't be America anymore, okay? We won't be bringing the world those freedoms. So I personally think that if I were to sit down and have a conversation with 90% of the people in this country, we would find that we agree on most things, okay? We have to find a way to have that in the public discourse. And so I guess that would be my answer is, yeah, it does seem to be leaning towards more authoritarian, and I hope that this stage doesn't last as long as it could. But the reality of it is that the world is changing, and we're nervous about it like everyone else, and so we're trying to protect what is ours.
I like to finish, just a little glimpse into my tradecraft. I like to finish any interview I do with two questions. What have I missed, and who else should I talk to? I'm going to tweak that for this context. By the way, it's a great practice. Try it at Thanksgiving. So what would you say that we haven't already brought up that you cannot let anyone in this room leave without knowing?
All right, so the people in this room, the corporate leaders, have to understand that the decisions that you make in your boardrooms are as important as any decisions that are made in Washington in terms of the trajectory of this nation, right? And so you have to keep in mind that national resilience runs through you, okay? If I were to give you advice, I would tell you that there's probably 4 things that you ought to consider. One, I think that you have to think of redefining what your fiduciary responsibilities are, okay? So we talked last year about profits and chasing profits in China, and you end up, with a sack of coal. So for you need to redefine fiduciary responsibility to include what is defendable, okay? How do you defend those networks? How do you defend your supply chains? How do you defend your information architecture? 2, you have to be technologically ethical. The difference between us and some of our competitors is that we have ethics in how we built out our informational systems. Okay? We have to protect that ethics, because if we don't, we lose the most important thing we have, and that is trust. Okay? And if you don't have trust, then there will always be suspicion, and you will never gain the benefit of being the best choice, I guess, in terms of these markets, okay? So I will drop you like a hot potato the first time I get an opportunity if I don't trust you. And that's the way everybody else will think who's dealing with you from a business perspective. I think that you have to think about integrating security into your strategy, okay? It cannot be a silo. It has to go across everything that you do in the company, okay? Including your culture. It has to be one of security if we're going to protect ourselves, if you're going to protect your business. It's about survivability. And then the last thing that I would say is, in today's environment, you must understand that no company stands alone, okay? And so that means that whatever it's your suppliers, your partners, your competitors, okay? Each one of you are providing sort of mutual protection against those threats to your organization. And so you need to seek out joint ventures, you need to seek out partnerships, you need to share your intelligence and your capabilities where you can to make all of us stronger.
Well, Bob's about to get the hook, but I do have one more question I'm dying with curiosity about. If you were sitting here and could interview anyone yourself about the global threat brief, who would you want to talk to? Who would have all the answers for you to the questions that I pose?
ChatGPT.
It has to.
All right.
It has to be a person with a first and last name.
No, so I make that.
That is in 3D.
No, I make the joke ChatGPT because the reality of it is that no one person has the answers. Matt put up a slide at the beginning, which I totally agree with, and that is no one is smarter than all of us. We collectively have to find solutions to the problems that we see in our world. And the sooner we do that, the better it will be for our society.
Thank you, Johnny.
All right, thank you.
That was great.